You are listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 25th of December 2024 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Broadcasting from Midori House in London, this is a special Christmas Day edition of The Globalist. I'm Chris Cermak. We'll be focusing on the year in design and fashion for today's episode, starting with a look at Ukraine's traditional dress and culture.
And people now, it's so distinctive, people now actually, who might not have known about Ukraine before, 3-4 years ago, they might now be able to mark you out and say, oh look, that's Ukrainian there. And it's a beautiful way, I think, of expressing that.
Followed by a review of the year in design and fashion with our editors of the design sections of Monocle magazine, as well as our representative from Confect. And we'll also head to a growing tradition of Christmas markets in Zagreb.
We realized that sausages and mulled wine, it was boring for us as well. So we wanted to do something that we would enjoy.
That's all up ahead on this special holiday edition of The Globalist from London. We begin today's show with Ukraine, which despite everything will be embracing the holidays as best as it can, and that includes with some classic folk traditions and a revival of the country's national dress. Well, joining me to tell us more is Monocle's writer-researcher Julia Lasica. Julia, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
This is officially now, if you will, Christmas Day in Ukraine after the Ukrainian sort of Orthodox Church moved the date last year for the first time. How does it feel?
Well, I mean, I guess it's another continuation of Ukraine sort of cementing its aspiration to be truly in, the Western world. And that means having our celebrations at the same time as everyone else in the civilized world. And so, yeah, it's very exciting. But actually, the 25th is the sort of day of, rest, recovering from the 24th, the evening of the 24th, as you will know as a fellow continental European.
Fellow continental Austrian German, yes. We celebrate more the 24th.
The 24th is the magical evening. That's when the star is out in the sky, and that's when you sit down for supper, and that's your big meal of the festive season.
See, we do have the big meal on the 25th, so we do the big celebration on the 24th. That's our little distinction. Yeah. But everywhere has it a little bit differently, and we'll get into some of that. But I did want to, before we also talk more about the traditions, specifically ask you about the national dress, because you've done a piece for Monocle magazine about it, which for the December-January issue, which was about the revival of national dress in lots of different places, but you focused on the Vyshyvanka.
Yes, definitely. So I was helping our foreign affairs editor, Alexa Self, put this together, and we had, the UAE's national dress and Nigeria's and Germany's, etc. But one of the ones that we focused on that I wrote about was the Vyshyvanka, and this is Ukraine's sort of ancient embroidered shirt, and it's just one part of the sort of wider kind of national dress that you can put on. Every region, down to the smallest village will have its own variations, colours, patterns, symbols. And it's a gorgeous tradition. Women used to be the ones who would make the Vyshyvanka. They would start when they would sort of reach kind of 10, 12 years old, and they would start making their own shirts for themselves, for their families, for their future husbands. And so when they got married, they would have this beautiful chest full of embroidered shirts that they would take as their dowry. It was a beautiful tradition, but not one that has continued, sadly.
Well, maybe that part hasn't, but the tradition of the dress itself, I mean, it does have quite a history. I remember seeing them actually at Ukraine's sort of national museum abroad of Ukraine in Chicago, where they had an exhibition on the Vyshyvanka as well. So they do have this history as also, I guess, a form of expression that was, for at least a time, also banned under the Soviets.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the whole language of symbols that you use to create a Vyshyvanka, you will have grown up, being surrounded back in the days when this was sort of part of life. You would have been grown up surrounded by this language of symbols around you. So, an oak leaf might mean strength, and you'll put that on a man's shirt, for example, or a rose will mean fertility or love, and you'll put that on a woman's shirt. You might make make that as a sort of aspiration for yourself. So they're sort of like dreams and prayers, and they are very much an expression of self, and that has massively continued in contemporary modern Ukraine. They're used now as a symbol to mark yourself out. If you're walking along the streets out, in Kyiv, but also abroad, you can show to the world, I'm Ukrainian. And people now, it's so distinctive, people now actually, who might not have known about Ukraine before 3-4 years ago, they might now be able to mark you out and say, oh, look, that's a Ukrainian there. And it's a beautiful way, I think, of expressing that.
That is one of the things that has changed more generally, is it fair to say, as well, in the last few years? I mean, how much more important has showing Ukraine's national culture become over the past few years?
So it all really started after the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and in 2015, the summer after that, Vita Kin was the first Ukrainian designer who showed her designs at fashion weeks, and she was the one who really brought the Vyshyvanka to the international stage. But since then, you've had a proliferation of different designers using it, and the one that's sort of leading the crowd now is Gunya, who I interviewed, both the co-founders of that, Natalia Kamenska and Maria Havrylyuk. Natalia Kamenska is actually the stylist to Ukraine's First Lady. And you'll see the First Lady, you'll see the President himself, you'll see all sorts of state officials, but also children will be wearing them for state occasions. You'll wear them perhaps I was describing a birthday in my piece, a birthday where people were gathering wearing the Vyshyvankas. So it's sort of used as a celebration. It's a gorgeous thing.
And beyond the dress and the Vyshyvanka itself, I'm curious, in general, do you get the feeling that people are more conscious, I suppose, when they celebrate Ukrainian culture around the holidays at the moment? Are they sort of leaning into traditions, maybe even in a way that you might not have 10 years ago?
Definitely. That's absolutely true. I mean, we have it sort of everywhere in each country. We're kind of going back to the land. We're going back to sort of organic foods and sort of more earthly lifestyles, thinking about our impact on the planet. And this is very much part of it as well. So in Ukraine, on Christmas Eve, we'll eat a wheat-based, that's our main dish, is a wheat-based berry dish. And it's very, it's still technically Lent, so we can't have any meat in it. We can only have fish. And it's very, it's a fascinating dish. It's got poppy seeds as well, so it's super healthy, but it's also it's kind of a balance to like the overly rich foods that we might have in a more like American style Christmas Eve or Christmas Day meal. And we also create the diduhi. Diduhi are also wheat-based. I mean, Ukraine is famous for its wheat, and we love to use it everywhere. Diduhi are kind of Christmas trees, and they're wheat stalks that are bound together with straw. And yet people sort of use that as a way to reflect on what the year has brought them and what they wish for the year ahead. And I guess anything manual, we're kind of going back to that now, aren't we? Moving away from digitalizations. Anything manual is helping you sort of process what's been going on around you, creating these dishes, preparing them as a family, creating the diduhi, binding the wheat sheaves together. It's sort of helping you use your hands to process things.
And just finally, Julia, you are celebrating Christmas this year in the UK for the first time, I understand. What of those traditions will you be bringing with you here?
So actually, it won't be my first UK Christmas, but definitely
first time in a while.
But yeah, definitely it will be. Well, one of my favourite traditions is that my mum opens the window and she shouts out to Father Christmas and asks him to come and visit the house. It's when the first star has risen in the sky, and that's when we're allowed to sit down at the meal. Obviously in London or in big cities, that's a little bit tricky because you have to contend with smog and all sorts of things going on and airplanes flying through the sky.
Oh, surely none of that matters.
But it's a beautiful moment. That's my favourite bit. And then we have to go around, and the Ukrainians are all cultures, we're all very superstitious, aren't we, at the end of the day? And one of my favourite sort of superstitions that we do is we blow off all the old spirits from the old year. We blow them off our seats before we sit down to have this kind of start to really 2025 start for the new year.
Julia Lisica of Monocle, thank you very much for joining us. This is The Globalist. This is The Globalist. I'm Chris Cermak. And now for a look back at the year that was in fashion and design at the same time. We're joined by Monocle's design editor, Nick Manise, and associate editor, Grace Charlton. Welcome to you both.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, Chris Cermak.
Nick, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, we're just going straight into it.
We're just going straight. What do we need? Any kind of, you want some Christmas cheer?
I would have liked some Christmas cheer, to be honest. I would have thought we'd go with fashion. Like Christmas, there's no Christmas sweaters here.
Actually, you're wearing matching forest green shirts,
we are,
which is quite
honor.
sweet.
And feels appropriately seasonal.
Yeah, and you've got your
Exactly.
luscious brown locks tucked under the headband. Looking
True.
great, guys.
Also grown out specifically for Christmas. Is that what we do?
Yeah,
Nick?
100%.
Yeah.
I'm
I like
getting
it.
maybe I'll get a beard going in, honour of my namesake, Father Christmas, St. Nicholas.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, there is that.
Okay, but I digress. Now I'm ready to talk design.
Well, I don't know. Now I feel like I have to go to Grace
Well,
after
maybe
you did
you do
that
go to
whole
Grace.
thing.
Okay, let's
So
go to
maybe I
Grace.
have to go to Grace. What I'm interested in, Grace, is in the notes that you sent me ahead of this for our little chat today. You're feeling quite philosophical for Christmas.
I thought I might get your attention with this. Nick, for context, I brought up Francis Fukuyama's seminal essay, The End of History, because I'm
for
arguing...
a fashion year roundup.
Exactly. We're getting heady with it. It's
really,
Christmas.
Really getting into my area here.
Exactly. So in my head, what I've noticed is that all these different trends, Nick is laughing. He's all right, I've already lost him.
This is good. This is good.
We're waiting for the build-up.
So, you used to have trends and they'd be defined within decades, and then that started accelerating in the 2010s, and then it was like even faster and faster, and it's all been spinning out of control. And there were all these micro trends that I was being bombarded with last year, including the color red being a trend, which is...
Is that a micro trend?
Yeah, it was like wearing a red scarf is it, you guys. And everyone lost their minds. Even though it's a primary color.
But hang on, but where does something like Bottega Veneta green fit into the... Is that an
That
actual
was a
trend?
few years ago.
Yeah,
I love how you knew that.
but I'm saying,
You're trying to seem...
is there a point where colour does become a trend? I appreciate you saying red is just... That's
a primary
red.
color. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But no, but this is what I'm saying, actually. Now, all the microtrends have accelerated to the point that it's all dissolving, and we've reached the end form of fashion and trends, and there are no more trends because everything is in fashion all the time.
There is no trend left to come, really.
Exactly.
So if I were to ask about 2025, there's just nothing. There's no trends left. It's just all one massive amalgamation of everything.
Exactly. The ideological evolution has evolved to its final form.
But where does that... Hang on. I feel like I'm at university and we're in some sort of like lecture where everyone's just trying to contribute, and maybe on various substances. But I like something like... Because Chris shared... To truly get university, Chris shared your notes with me, so I did see that reference. But you also wrote that like mob wife core is gone. But what's fascinating about that was like a 2-week thing.
Yeah,
so is that
This is what I'm telling. But this is what I'm saying. All these micro trends.
It like passes, comes and passes.
Yeah, something
so
like
quickly.
flares used to be in fashion for 10 years straight, and now something like mob wife core is gone in 2 weeks. We're over it.
How do you keep up with this, Nick? I mean, you were just mentioning before like a trend from 3 years ago, so clearly you struggle with the 2-week routine.
Well, I mean, that's quite brutal, Christopher. But you're pretty much spot on. But I would say the person
I'm no different, by the way,
person I look to
on
for
this.
inspiration is my Uncle Jerry, who has been in and out of trend, in and out of fashion so many times over the last 40 years. He's just wearing acid wash jeans, a plain white T-shirt and Dunlop volleys. They come in, they come out. It doesn't matter. He stays steady. That's the sort of person that we want to be looking to as I think a fashion icon.
Exciting. I love that trend for you, Nick. I do have to ask you now, I'm going to turn to design a little bit because, we do have to bring this in. You are the design editor despite trying to be fashion as well here.
A boy can dream.
What have you learned from the design scene? I mean, I don't know. Are you seeing a similar thing? Can you bounce off of that philosophical trend or non-trend, the end of trends from Grace?
100%. And the thing, maybe the thing we can talk about is trends in terms of materials. I mean, Grace and I were talking earlier about there was this real aluminium moment earlier in the year where everything seemed to be shiny and polished and made of aluminium. And there's an argument for that. I mean, there's one who doesn't love something like raw and beautiful and powerful, that you might have a delicate chair but made out of this material like that. But there's also probably a sustainability argument for it. I mean, you can have recycled aluminium. There's an amazing Norwegian firm. We saw them at London Design Week, Grace, that make a heap of different furniture. Hydro, they're called, that's the one. A heap of different furniture out of recycled aluminium. So there's the sustainability piece. And where I am going with this, trust me, there is more.
I'm ready.
It's the evolution of materials in the way that we're developing and building things. One of the big things I've noticed this year is, there was a moment, I feel, maybe a year ago where everything was recycled plastic, or maybe 2 years ago, everything was recycled plastic, and it was looking at, I guess, waste all around us. But what I'm particularly interested in is making the most of local waste to create new materials that are then imbued with a sense of place. Have we followed that logic? Does that make sense? So
we're going with it.
In Dubai, at Dubai Design Week, it was just a few months ago, there was this amazing project by this young architect called Abdullah Al-Mullah, who created a full pavilion out of cement that used waste brine, which is a huge waste material in the UAE. They use desalination plants. They pump the brine back out into the sea or dump it on land. It's a huge issue. And they've used that to develop this new cement material, which obviously can then be used to build houses. It takes this waste out of the system. It's moving towards circularity. But it grounds, I guess, the architecture or the building materials in place. I mean, who doesn't love going to the Nordics and staying in a log cabin, with trees felled, 100 metres from where you're staying? It's a similar thing happening here. And that's, if we're talking trends, if we're talking materiality, that's one I'd like to see continue.
Materiality trends of sustainability as well, which is obviously something that hasn't just been in this last year, but I would throw that one maybe to you, Grace, as well. Have you noticed a shift in any way in kind of how sustainability is talked about in the fashion world and materials used?
I'd actually think it's not being talked about as much as it once was. I think it's sort of like the big elephant in the room, and especially with COVID, and everyone was like, this is it, we're not going to do this crazy 4 shows a season format, and it's just sort of gone back to normal. So no, I wish I could agree, but I'm not sure.
Do you think, have we just got bored of sustainability as a word? I mean, I tune out when I hear it.
It's a bit virtuous.
Yeah.
But it sounds like in the design world, it is still more of a conversation at the moment, a little more of an open one, what materials you use, than maybe even in fashion at the moment.
Perhaps, but I think there's also an element of it's how those materials are then applied. It's one thing to, make something cool out of recycled plastic or, cement, but it's another thing to actually have something that moves you, and I think that's almost more important than the sustainable materials. It's like if something's ugly, you kind of or doesn't make you feel good, why would you want to stay in it or wear it? Or so I think it's almost like the discussion needs to be first going back to aesthetics and feelings, and then the sustainability piece can come in afterwards.
Makes sense. Grace, Nick mentioned chairs, which I'm just going to use that as an amazing transition to the musical chairs that are taking place in fashion.
That is very good.
That is what's been happening. We've been talking about that a lot this year, I know, with our fashion director, Natalie Theodosi, as well. What have you made of this, the amount of changes and transitions among fashion brands? Everyone is going somewhere else, quitting, leaving, going to a different one. Why is that?
I don't know. It must be in the stars. There must be some lack of alignment going on. I just have no idea. But it's going to be an interesting
the year of realignment.
Yeah. So just a sample: Pier Paolo Piccioli left Valentino. Alessandro Michele, who used to be at Gucci, took over. Virginie Viard has left Chanel. Eddie Slimane has left Celine, Peter Hawkins has left Tom Ford, Peter Doe has left Helmut Lang, and we're all, everyone is gossiping behind the scenes, who's going to take over Chanel, who's nah. So it's very exciting. It'll be nice to see where it goes. I like change. I think it's good.
Do you get a sense of where it will go, or that's just we are now currently at the end of the year in the gossip stage of what the heck's going to happen in 2025?
I hope there'll be some unexpected names. Some genuine talent that you've never heard of. I hope they'll give a newcomer a chance to take over a house. I'm always rooting for the underdog,
Can always root for the underdog.
Can I ask as well, how it's funny, okay, so you've got obviously the house itself, but then these creative directors come in and they have such a big impact. Are you expecting, and I mean, I have no idea what I'm talking about here, but are you expecting, is there going to be, would you expect Chanel to shift away from what it's doing currently, whoever they bring in? Are they often looking for, I guess, radical change, or is it more maybe a subtle hint in or move in one direction or the other?
I think Chanel is a little bit more conservative. They've got such a strong brand identity that was set by Mademoiselle Chanel herself, and Karl Lagerfeld did a good job of taking over. Virginie Viard was the subject of so much criticism. I'm interested to see who Chanel chooses. I wonder if they'll go for a Marc Jacobs kind of figure. They'll probably go for more of a star power person, but they'll be expected to, stay within the tweed and the gold buttons of the house.
So almost getting a bit more conservative, potentially.
Potentially.
Nick, I'm going to transition this straight back to you on the musical chairs, because there's also been a musical chairs of design fairs.
There has. I mean, that segue was.
Did I lose that?
That was a little bit more tenuous. That was a little bit more tenuous, but I appreciate you doing it. No, I thought the other one was super, super clever. I just wished you hadn't forced that, because now I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable. But
just blow past it, Nick. Blow past it. What is the
I'm trying to make it work. It's
like?
not working, Chris. Maybe musical chairs in terms of my preference, perhaps.
That there has been a change in which design fairs are dominating, what the interesting ones are, which ones kind of are moving up the ranks, down the ranks.
I think so. I mean, I think, and Grace and I cover, we go to a host of different design fairs across the world for Monocle on Design and the Monocle Minute on Design. Subscribe. But I think Salone del Mobile, Milan Design Week is still, it's the fair. It's where all the business happens. But it's also where you're starting to see creep from other industries come in. So there's a lot of fashion entering. I saw Kellogg's did something for Milan Design Week this year. It was bizarre. And I think what's happened is it's made, whilst Milan, it's not going to be, unseated from its throne. It's still going to be the most dominant one, but it's getting messy and busy, and you maybe don't see as much because you've got maybe a little bit of decision paralysis. By comparison, something like 3 Days of Design in Copenhagen, it's curated. So Kellogg's couldn't just rock up and, put on a show with the 3 Days of Design banner on it. It's a little bit more focused. It's certainly more regional leaning, which I think is a good thing, because you go there and you're going to see Scandinavian design. And I think that's the sort of move I would like to see. I mean, Grace, I'd be curious for your thoughts. It was your first time at 3 Days of Design this year. Did you feel something similar?
It seemed pretty big. I mean, I had decision paralysis a few nights as well. The thing is, it just lasts for 3 days, not a whole week like it does in Milan. It'll be interesting to see how they evolve the format, because they are getting so popular.
Yeah.
Did you also see this merging of fashion and design, as it were, in some of these?
Not in Copenhagen, but in Milan, 100%. Like all the cocktail nights are hosted by, Loewe and all the fun brands. They're
the ones you want to go to, because they've got the budgets in the way that our dear friends in furniture maybe don't.
Our poor dear friends in furniture.
Poor dear friends in furniture. Spare a thought for them.
Spare a thought. Hopefully they'll do better in 2025. Grace and Nick, thank you very much for joining us. That was Grace Charlton and Nick Manise, and this is The Globalist. You are back with The Globalist. I'm Chris Cermak, and it's time to talk Confect now. That's the sister publication to Monocle magazine, and for that I'm joined by Marcella Palik, Confect's style director. Marcella, great to have you on the show. What's the year been like for you in Confect world? We're up to 17 editions now.
Yeah, wow, it was an intense year, a lot going on, and if you're asking me about the highlights, so I could talk for, let's say, 2 hours. So let's start.
I'm sure you could. There are many highlights, but give us a couple.
Yeah. So actually, what I love most is when I can do kind of story overreaching roundups that is more about just one shoot or one reportage or one interview. So when handpicked, researched locations, stories, and fashion brands are connected and reflect the regional culture that give you an overall impression.
Absolutely. And for that specifically, I know you've been doing, I guess, something of a Central European tour in the last year or so, or last half year or so, focusing on Prague. What did you find there?
Yeah, so for Confect Autumn, we went to Prague and shot in the quite unknown Villa Volman, a half an hour drive outside from the city in Čelakovice. And this was absolutely exciting. So the modernist villa from the 1930s is inspired by Le Corbusier. And of course, it was a great shooting location for fashion.
And what kind of things did you shoot there?
So, of course, I took chic looks and pieces from the new fall collections. The big brands and things we love at Confect in the specific Confect style that when you're reading Confect regularly. But I also did a research about local fashion brands from the surroundings like Peter Petrov, Natures of Conflict, and Rosa Moza from Vienna, or the beautiful brand Nehera from Bratislava, Leda from Prague, or beautiful Chilak from Warsaw. And by the way, our photographers, Magda Wunche and Aga Samsel, who shot the story, were also from Warsaw. So it was kind of really, like you said, Central European peace.
Well, and Marcella, as you're talking a little bit about this idea of kind of using local crafts, we were just talking a little earlier on the show about kind of local architecture as well. And this is something that clearly you've been highlighting in the fashion and the confect world as well. So the local crafts and brands on your travels, how do you kind of use those? How do they inform what you're doing once you come back to Zurich?
So, well, I love to discover small niche brands and local craft, like you say, when I'm just traveling, because you can't discover them actually on Instagram, I think. You have just to do research and find them, touch them, feel them, see them. And that's something that you can't transport in pictures, I think, quite well. So you have to discover them. And in my eyes, it's the best to style beautiful fashion that we know from international big fashion houses with such unexpected craft pieces that you found somewhere. Think, for example, a perfectly tailored Prada coat I would combine with wooden clogs, with a wild goat fur from Bregenz Wald, or an amazing handbag by Bottega Veneta woven with leather bands, combined with a minimally embroidered man's djellaba from Marrakesh. Or I would wear a sleek Gilsander pantsuit with a pair of woolly, quirky babouche from the souk. I love this kind of combination.
A few combinations for our listeners to try out there. Marcella, one other thing before we let you go. When you look at 2025 and the year to come, is there a particular place you've been or would like to go back to for the next trends?
I mean, I don't tell you now where we plan to go. That's a secret. We are discussing it now. But actually, I would love to go back maybe to Bucharest. This is a very, very interesting city, waking up now. I was there and visited the amazing Irina Morosanu with her brand, Les Vacances d'Irina. And she took me to quite interesting places. For example, the National Museum of Romanian Peasants. And there is a huge museum shop, but not what you would expect from a museum shop, but something more interesting. She showed me peasants' blouses, hand-painted ceramics, folk fabrics and more, all vintage. Imagine, by Romanian farmers from all over the country. It was so interesting to discover those traditional crafts and cultural heritage. I think I have even to go back just for this museum.
There is some crossover there as well, Marcella, because we were just talking earlier on this show about a national dress from Ukraine. Is that something that you've been finding in the fashion world as well? The sort of revival of not just local craft, I guess, then, but national dress, folk dress as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about those elements that are transferred in modern shapes and modern tailoring. Of course, you can't wear just, folkloric dresses. This looks quite of a kind of like from
a time past,
folkloric party or something. But I think if you mix it, transfer it to modern shapes, then it's amazing. And there is a couple of Ukrainian brands actually who are working between whatever is possible, Kiev and Paris or Berlin or London, and they are doing an amazing job and they have beautiful collections.
Interesting to hear. Marcella, thank you very much for joining us today. That was Marcella Palais-Confect's style director from Zurich. This is The Globalist. This is The Globalist, and finally on today's show we head to Croatia's capital, Zagreb, which is now well established as one of Europe's top seasonal destinations, and that is down to its Christmas markets, which have won multiple awards and feature in many of this year's festive must-visit lists. Not bad considering that Zagreb Advent only got underway in earnest a decade ago. Well, Monocle's man in the Balkans, Guy Delani, went along to find out why it is such a festive success.
Welcome to Zagreb Advent. This is the undisputed regional champion of Christmas markets. The events take over pretty much the whole city, with more than 24 locations offering some sort of seasonal shenanigans. And by that, I don't just mean the usual mulled wine and sausage stalls, but all sorts of live music, art installations, and an absolutely epic ice skating park. No wonder it was declared Europe's top Christmas market 3 times in a row before it was barred from running again. And that reputation is pulling in punters from near and far, not just from around the country, but across Europe and even further afield.
We had people from South America, we have people from all over Europe, we had a nice lady from Armenia, literally from all over the world.
Mario Stojanovic runs a food stall at the Christmas market on Zagreb's main square.
I think the locations are really well thought. The offer is really good. I think most of the booths are really trying to offer something unique, and we have that warm hospitality that's famous for Croatian people. So everybody should come and check it out, I think.
We've gone through a metal door and into the Grič tunnel, which runs into the hillside in the middle of Zagreb, but it's really like we've stepped through a portal into a totally different realm, because all around us are icebergs and projections on shards of glass of animals which roam the polar tundra. There's music as well, and in the middle, a centerpiece, the Polar Express itself, a rather large model train, a little bit temperamental, which turns around in a circle on a beautifully wrought metal platform.
So we built this little train station, houses and icebergs.
Andrej Bestak is one of the creators of the Polar Express, along with Anja Lekpa.
We wanted to make something that feels very Christmassy but doesn't have these usual symbols.
How important is it, do you think, that Zagreb Advent has different things like what's going on here in the tunnel?
People don't really go to galleries, but they go to these kinds of events, and it's nice to kind of bring it to them.
I wouldn't want anyone to get the idea that Zagreb Advent is only for chin-stroking aesthetes. There is, of course, a major element of good old-fashioned winter bacchanal in play here. There are sausages, stew and stuffed cabbage rolls, as well as mulled wines, hot cocktails and rakia. But here on the terrace of the historic Hotel Esplanada, there's also a little refinement. The market here is known as fooling around, and they're not messing with the food and drink on offer, with Michelin-starred snacks among the temptations for the punters.
We realized that sausages and mulled wine, it was boring for us as well. So we wanted to do something that we would enjoy. So we were the first to introduce the real chefs from the really good restaurants on the street.
Zrinka Farina is one of Fooling Around's organisers.
We are really trying to give the upscale experience for all the gourmet lovers, for people who can really appreciate good restaurants. And every year we are trying to bring more and more sophisticated menus and better chefs.
You say that it's upscale and sophisticated, but it's not intimidating. And I mean that in terms of price as well. If you come here and you want to get some food from, and if we turn around and we look here, we've got a Michelin star over there on that sign which says Noel. We've got stuff from the Esplanade Hotel. We've got the JRE Young Chefs sign as well as over there too. This isn't going to set you back an arm and a leg.
No, because the chefs really see this as a also chance for them to experiment, to see if they can put the haute cuisine dishes in a street food format, and they're very precise, they're very passionate, very talented. So we have some of the best places from Korčula, from Brač, from all over Croatia here, and this moment it's a haute cuisine brought to street food format.
The opening of the ice park officially got Zagreb Advent underway at the start of the month. This almost absurdly expansive skating paradise meanders around Tomislav Square, with icy trails to explore as well as a main rink. It's opposite the city's railway station, which used to be a stop on the Orient Express. These days, it's where visitors arrive on special trains from neighbouring Hungary and Slovenia. And hitting the ice park first is only fitting, because that's where Zagreb Advent as we now know it started.
In 2014, when Ice Park was introduced, Advent really grew. It really made its signature on the Advent map of Europe.
Slavica Olic-Klapčić organises both the Ice Park and events in nearby Zrinjevac Park, Zagreb's original Christmas market venue.
Advent is not only the locations with the huts. We're talking about hotels and a lot of visitors coming, restaurants, shops. So I think for the economy of the city, it's actually fantastic.
Can you put numbers on it?
We're talking about 500,000 people.
All this merriment means big business for Zagreb. The tourist board puts up less than €1 million to support the various locations and cultural programmes. But the result is a bonanza for Zagreb's hospitality sector. Last December it pulled in more than €100 million. That's a rise of 25% year on year. And it's hoping for even more this festive season. Slavica Olic-Klapčić thinks the future's bright.
Whoever is creative and who would like to do this job has a chance for it, which is fantastic. I think the whole Advent in Zagreb can really develop into something even bigger but nicer.
It's enough to leave other European cities quaking in their winter boots. The Croatian capital's laid down a challenge. If they want to win the prize for the continent's best Christmas market, they've got a festive fight on their hands. For Monocle, in Zagreb, I'm Guy Delaunay.
Guy, thank you very much for that. I'm sure many people will be adding Zagreb to their Christmas visit list for next year. But that's all the time we have for today's program. Thank you very much to our producer, Hassan Anderson, and our studio manager, Elliot Greenfield. After the headlines, there is more music on the way. There is a special edition of The Briefing coming up at midday in London. The Globalist returns at the same time tomorrow. I'm Chris Cermak. Thank you very much for tuning in and wishing you all a very Merry Christmas Day.